I can try if you want, if that's all right with you. I wanted to know, what did you choose to go from writing to directing a movie? How did this happen?
It's funny, I'd always read this book, and I read this in university, so a very long time ago, almost 25 years, and I always thought I was going to write it and direct it, and I always, because I was a big movie buff at university and beyond, I've still watched a lot of movies, so I always had this idea of writing and directing. The reality is very different, so when I got out I suddenly found that I was getting offered jobs as a writer and not necessarily as a director, but in the back of my mind this was always the book that I felt I sort of understood, mainly because the characters, when I read the book, these characters really stayed with me, and almost the fact that they're so contradictory, and that there's darkness and light, there's hatred and cruelty and tenderness and love at the same time, that all these different qualities made me just remember these characters. So I always just thought, this is the one I want to direct, just because I felt I knew the characters. That was the most important thing for me, and often I'll write scripts that I wouldn't be at all interested in directing, but with this one I felt I'd know what to say to the actors if they asked me the questions.
How did you choose the actors?
The actors, well, with Vigo, it was interesting because we had the same agent in America, and I'd written the script, and my writer's agent gave it to all the actors' agents, and Vigo happened to read it because he reads a lot, and he said he was interested, and then I had to go and meet him in Madrid, and almost like audition as a director, and to say, look, I've never directed before, but give me a chance. And I didn't need to, because he was so kind and gracious and made me feel so comfortable and easy, and then he became the person who we went out to financiers with, and he was like my partner almost in the film. Then Oscar I'd worked with on Drive, so I wanted to cast him from the beginning, but because I'd never directed a film before, and he'd not really done that, he hadn't been cast as the lead in the Coen Brothers movie, so it was very hard to cast him. But then he did that, and then that made it very easy for me. And Kirsten, I think, had read the script, and she was interested in doing it, and she was initially quite different from the Kirsten in the book and the Kirsten I had in my head, having written the script. But I then rewrote it a bit around her character.
Ok, j'ai une question à vous poser par rapport à une impression que j'ai eue en voyant le film.
Oui,
en
je
français,
comprends, oui.
que Simon traduira. On essaiera. C'est par rapport à la thématique du masculin, de l'homme. J'ai trouvé qu'il y avait des parallèles à faire avec Drive, par exemple, sur la femme qui est coincée entre deux hommes, qui sont aussi ambivalents dans leur tempérament. Et j'aimerais savoir si c'est une thématique qui vous inspire en particulier,
Yes.
ou
Oui,
c'est quelque chose que vous voulez exploiter précisément.
It's definitely, Heat is one of my favourite films, the Michael Mann film. Heat, is it in français, c'est le même?
Oui, I think it is. I'm not sure.
Avec De Niro, Al Pacino.
Yes, oui.
And I love this duality between men, almost the conflict, the combat, but also the in a way especially in Highsmith's work, it starts off as a love triangle, but she's almost more interested in the men than she is. Often the women are used, and this is her, I think, not me, but often the women are used as a catalyst to bring the men into some sort of combat, and then she explores almost a homoerotic relationship between two men. That's her. I think in all her, with Ripley it's the same, with all the other books and things she's written, Strangers on a Train, which they did as a great film. There's always this weird love affair, love-hate story between two men, and I find that very fascinating. But I also find that triangle, what you were talking about, the idea of the triangle of the woman and the two men, just because, and I guess as a man, it feels that vulnerability in men around women. I find very interesting, the idea that another man can, you know, it's when you're weakest as a man, when you lose the woman you love to somebody else. I find that really fascinating as a thing. And I think mainly because it exposes, I think, a frailty in men and a vulnerability and stuff like that. And I always find vulnerability actually more interesting in characters often than strength. And I think, but what I really love is when the strength is there and there's vulnerability underneath. And I think, and that always comes out, I think, in contests it comes out very strongly in contests between men over women. And it's tough because I sort of wanted to make, when I wrote the script, I wanted to make Colette stronger than she was in the book and more present. But when we edited the film, people were, when I showed it early cuts to test audiences, they were always interested in the two men. And I think that's Patricia Highsmith's writing coming back into her DNA, coming back into the film.
Actually, jumping on that, on the Wings of the Dove, it's actually evolved
Same
around,
story.
but two women and one man.
Yeah.
And in the Two Faces of January, it's
Yeah.
actually two men and one woman.
Yeah.
So there's always this same subject.
It does interest me because I think, again, it's the jealousy is something that really interests me. Again, the way you hurt someone you love, I find really interesting. I find, you know, that's one of the things in this book that when there were moments in the scene when they're all sitting around the table, where one moment Chester can be very loving towards his wife, and then can suddenly say something really nasty. And I hate to admit this about myself, but I've done that. I know, I recognise doing that thing where you're in a bad mood and you're just suddenly very... And the only people who let you do that are people who are close to you anyway. So I think it's that weakness we have where we're cruel and things like that. And I think she just... The thing about, for me, the writers who capture that very tiny nuances in human relationships is what I find really interesting.
So, are you aware that you play a Greek tragedy?
Yes. Yeah. No, I think it was it's actually one of the things that really drew me to the book, but also I've always, as a child, I was very into the whole Greek mythology and Greek tragedy, but the idea of, and one of the ideas, the themes that I loved about Greek tragedy is the idea that men fight the gods, and the gods play games, and you know, but when they're defeated, when they lose and they die or whatever, they're actually at their most human, and they sort of triumph. It's the Greek story of, I can't remember who the Titan is who steals fire.
Prometheus.
Yeah, but there's something about that Prometheus thing, which I thought the Prometheus story of men or Titan, human, you know, standing up to the gods and standing up to destiny and fate in terms of the Greek tragedy, that even though fate wins, it's how you express yourself as a human being that makes you kind of heroic, even if you're someone like Chester, who's and then also obviously the myth, the Theseus story, because it felt like you have Theseus is Rydell, Chester's the Minotaur, and she's obviously Ariadne. But with the Minotaur, what I always found as a child as well really fascinating about the Minotaur was that it was the human being inside the monster. That's one of the things that always made me always feel sorry for him. I don't know why I always felt sorry for the Minotaur, and I felt a very similar thing about Chester, where even though, you know, he's a man who becomes a monster, but he's also, there's the man inside the monster, and I thought those things made him, for me, very, very compelling as a character. That he's a very human monster.
So the death is the only solution for...
Well, death is also the only solution for Rydell, because it's, again, that's going back to the Greek mythology, is that the son needs to kill the father to become a man.
Yes.
So, in a way, the old, new replaces the old, which is, I think that's what, for me, that's what the title of the book is about, because January is the two-headed god, and brings in the new year out with the old, and then also the two faces where they're joined.
Yeah.
In the god has the two heads, one, but they're both facing outwards, which we felt they're two very different people, but actually they're really, because of this woman and their love for her, they're sort of tied together too.
Well, you were first a screenwriter, and I wanted to know what it was like to have your script shown on a movie, and were you ever satisfied with the movie result? of your script?
Yeah, I was, you know, it's always, yeah, and often they're much better than, you know, I think, you know, the scripts that I like is when a director brings, like, one of the things I loved about Dry was that Nicholas, I'd based Dry on a Western, really.
Yeah, it's a road movie.
It was like a Clint Eastwood comes into town and saves the, but then he brought this whole fairy tale element, which was really not in my mind at all, and I think that suddenly changed it into something more interesting. And then you know, with Michael Winterbottom on Jude, I love working with him because I think he's, you almost want directors to change, not change the script, but as a screenwriter, I want them to feel free to bring themselves into it. I think the ones that don't usually work is either when they change everything or when they shoot it exactly as you've written it, because then it becomes dead. And I found that as a director too. I find that you sort of have to, there's a freedom on the set. You need to be able to change things. Actors need to be able to say, actually I want to come in through that door rather than that door. When I'm depressed, I don't sit down, I walk. And all that, and that's what they're like as human beings, and that's much more interesting to capture than you saying, well, I want you to stand right there, and I want you to do this and do that. And I found that freedom was really important.
Do you think to make another movie?
I'd love to, but with a screenplay, it's really easy because I can change my name and write under another name, and I can sit at my laptop and write a screenplay. But as a director, someone needs to give you money, and actors need to say. So it kind of depends on how this film goes. But I'd love to, yeah.
Another movie of love, destruction. Another movie of love, destruction.
Yeah, like I kind of love and crime. There's an original idea I had, but about, again, it's always about betrayal.
Okay.
But people really feeling, you know, guilt and betrayal and jealousy, and those are the themes again and again.
Okay.
But you know, heist.
How it was to shoot in Greece with the people over there?
Well, it was interesting because it was right in the middle of the Troubles. There was a lot of, so for example, when we shot the cafe scene at the Acropolis, we could hear the riots going on, and then our hotel we were staying at, the staff went on strike, so we came out and they were all with their things on strike. And then Turkey was the same. It was Turkey. They were very, also because of the rivalry between Greece and Turkey. I think the Turkish crew, it was really important for them to be more professional than the Greek crews. That competition, but they were both fantastic crews.
But you had some problem like with the riots and everything.
No, I mean the only problem we had was more to do with, I think, Greek bureaucracy, which is they don't really say yes or no until the very last minute. So when we were filming at the Acropolis and at Knossos in Crete, we didn't know really until the day before if they really would let us shoot there. So some people say to you, don't worry, they always do this, of course you can shoot, and then other people say, you know, it's going to be tricky, and so there's a lot of stress.
Et par rapport à l'esthétique du film, la photographie, est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui a été très pensé à l'avance, j'imagine?
Oui.
Comment vous l'avez envisagé?
Again, I looked at a lot of Kodachrome photographs from the time, tourist pictures of the 60s, and we found on the website there was and I sort of wanted that look at the beginning. I sort of wanted the look to change. I didn't want one look through the whole film because I wanted the aesthetics almost to change as the characters changed. So I wanted it to be more about the psychology of the characters. So I wanted it to almost be, when you start in Athens, for it to be almost like a postcard. And then gradually they get to Crete and more minimalist, dust, heat, there's cramped buses, the colour palette becomes a little bit more pastel in terms of whatever, and then by the time you get to Istanbul, I want it to be more like a traditional film noir, so night, lots of night, rain, neon, all those sort of ideas. But it was really, I sort of wanted three different looks. So there was Athens, which was happy, colourful, touristy, whatever.
Same.
Crete, which I wanted more like a sort of almost as if the gods are punishing the characters. The idea of the harsh sunlight, dust, mountains, you know, the less, and then night, and really the third section was night. So it was really this idea of, in terms of the photography, to change the look, and also in terms of the camera moves, it was much more. There's much more tracking in the first section, and we start to use more handheld as the characters start to gradually unravel, and that was, it was all conscious. I storyboarded the whole movie, just because I'd never done it before. I thought I was so scared of not knowing what to do that I sort of, and we didn't use the storyboards. Huh?
Vous aviez peur?
Oui, beaucoup.
C'est vrai?
But I know we did a lot of. So I directed it when I wrote it in my head, storyboarded it, the whole thing, every scene, so we could, like, I felt that I'd done it a second time. So by the time we actually filmed it, I felt that it was my third film, not my first film. I think it's helpful for a person to be prepared. And for a person
because there's a lot of pressure actually.
There's such a pressure.
Yeah.
And also, you're not used to, the pressure of being on a set. It's something that was very new. But I loved it. They said you know, the thing about, the hardest thing is people ask you questions the whole time. I loved people asking me questions. Because even if they had better answers, I had one answer at least, and that was very helpful.
Mais pour revenir sur la question que je vous ai posée tout à l'heure, vous dites qu'il est essentiellement question de jalousie et de tout ce que la jalousie peut provoquer chez un homme. Mais moi, c'est ce qui m'a le plus fasciné dans le film, c'est vraiment la façon que vous avez eue, la personnalité des personnages, des deux hommes. De la façon que je l'ai ressenti, il n'est pas seulement question de jalousie, il y a aussi la lâcheté, beaucoup, vraiment la lâcheté des hommes. J'ai l'impression qu'à eux deux, ils sont tout ce qu'un homme peut être, de meilleur comme de pire.
No, exactly that was, yeah, absolument.
Et j'ai trouvé ça assez...
No, that's what I found that fascinating, and Jealousy simplifies it, because I love the fact that they love and hate each other. I think that's really, and I think that's some of the complexity you're talking about, is that you can, you know, and I think it's the relationship between not just a son and a father, but you know, a weaker man and a stronger man and things like that. It just, there's a real interaction of all that's good and bad in men. And I think it's and it's happened with her. What's fascinating is it happened with the Highsmith book, and what I liked about this was that it's very quick. It's those emotions. It's like in 1 second he can be trying to seduce his wife, and the next second is almost saying sorry to him for doing that, so he feels guilty. And the speed with which, like when they're sitting around the table, he can suddenly remember, you know, he's talking to Colette and he suddenly remembers Chester's there, tries to be nice to him. And I think that's something I recognise in lots of people I know myself as well, is that that thing between what's good and bad in us it also can change in a second. It's not that one day we're like this, the next day we're not. It's 1 second we're like that, the next second we're not. And same with the way you can treat someone you love, is he can be Colette, and then suddenly that sting. So that for me is really. I'm glad it came across as some of it.
As a screenplayer, do you want to work with a special director?
I have my favourite directors, yeah, but most of them write. I think the one director I love who doesn't write his own screenplays is Michael Mann.
Yes.
I love his stuff. I mean, all the other ones, you know, Paul Thomas Anderson, he writes his own. They all write their own scripts. Nicholas Refn I loved working with. I really enjoyed.
And did you enjoy this new movie, Only God Forgives, and his script? Actually?
Yeah, I did. I thought there was enough. There was such a, you know, I thought everyone was a bit tough on it. I thought it had an ambition and it had a beauty, but it's very difficult for me to judge friends' work. I mean, it's just and that's why with screenings, when you show things like early cuts of films, I think it's so important to show it to people you don't know, because friends always want to like it, or there's a different reaction.
Yeah, because it was criticized about the writing and not the directing, actually.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's but he's written some, I think the Pusher trilogy, he's written great scripts too. But yeah, he's...
Une question un peu plus formelle, mais est-ce que vous pouvez présenter votre parcours brièvement?
The parcours is...
Well, I couldn't say your journey, but how did you get there actually in the movie industry?
Oh, okay. I didn't go to film school. For me, the training I had, and it's one that I'd recommend because it's all I know, is just watching tons and tons of movies. is even for directing, that's what I found the most useful, is in preparation before I started shooting this. I just sat in front of, I bought a bigger television than I had before, and I watched all the 60s movies that I could find, and rewatched all the ones I loved, and wrote down shots that I liked, that movement, like there was like in Boogie Nights that comes off a crane and the Steadicam operator walks, and so suddenly you don't know how all those shots that you think, how did they do that? I was suddenly, but that's how I've always sort of learned, is really watching movies. It's and then even when I write, it's really imagining the film in my head, and even though the film that they make is probably very different, it's almost my dream of what the film should be like, without the problems of location and not enough extras, which happens in the reality of filmmaking. But I think film school could be fantastic. I didn't have a chance to do that, so. But I think all the French film critics, all the Four and all those the 60s, they all watched lots of movies. I think that's how they learned. So critics should be filmmakers. Seriously, I think there's
We'll try.
No, but I think it's like they come from every other theatre director, some direct films, whatever. It's like it's not. I think you have to love cinema to do it. You want to do the whole thing.
Well, a more general question is that in the cinema industry, they tend to focus on directors and not screenwriters. And in my opinion, I think it's based because we should focus more on the people who write the story than the people who are directing. And how do you feel about the role of screenplayer?
I feel, having directed now, I feel there's not just the screenwriter, it's the director of photography, the composer, the production designer. There's so many people involved in making a film, and I can understand the whole notion of the auteur and stuff like that, but I just think it's a false. There are directors with very strong visions, but they still need everyone around them. It's like even Hitchcock without Herman, or without the screenwriters he used, and the Coen brothers without Roger Deakins. Sometimes everyone there are other collaborators in that, and so one of the things as a writer that I find, it's funny because here it's different, but in England there's I don't like the film by credit at all. I think it's a really, and we as a screenwriter, it's something we've always screenwriters have always fought against the film by, but I just find it, having directed it, I find it even more of a struggle. And I saw they did that on the poster here, and I wasn't very, because in England we didn't. I have on the film I just have written and directed by as a credit, because I just can't bear the idea of a film by, it's just like a film by 250 people. So, and that's not modesty. That's a general. That's probably it's something I feel very strongly. Is a lie.
So we can call you a self-made man.
Well, in terms of education, no, definitely. But I think a lot of people probably, self-taught.
You must have had a lot of chance because even though you are self-made, you didn't go to university and
no,
everything.
I went to university. I had a
cinema university?
No, I didn't go to film school, but
Yeah,
I'm very lucky. I had a very good education and whatever. So in that
but
sense,
you had the chance to go into that industry by luck, or
by writing actually. That was writing. I think is probably the best way to get noticed. That's the thing, because every other job it's very hard to be seen, because if you're a runner or if you're to start out, I think it's very hard. But writing, at least you can get in. But I think again, writing, I didn't go to screenwriting school. I watched movies. But it's very hard. I think it's harder now than when I did it too. It's just the competition is ridiculous.
no more questions.
Do you have a good memories on the set of the movie?
Yeah, it was fantastic as we were filming, because also the places we filmed in. I remember like the Acropolis, where we had like just out of shot. There's like 500 tourists because we weren't allowed to close it, and all day everyone was incredibly nice, and nobody sort of, even though they couldn't. And eventually, one person just said, "You know what? I paid my money. Just walk through the shop."